Hi all, Fuzzy Bear Barbarian here again. Okay, so nearly all the best dual sword builds in Nioh use more than one armor set to buff their damage. In this video I'm going to show you each of these builds, all of which are powerful, a few of which may be considered the best dual sword builds there are. Now I'm careful to say the best, as I don't agree there is a single best. I think the best comes down to how a build suits your individual playstyle. Plus, best is relative. I mean, is the build that does more damage than any other from the front the best? Or is the build that does more damage than any other from behind the best? Because the two builds that can achieve both of those things are different builds. So yeah, the best is relative. But that said, nearly all of these powerful builds include 3 pieces from the Master Swordsman set. So see, right there is an argument to say the Master Swordsman set is the best. It isn't, of course, but it's certainly the best to model your build mixing and matching around in the majority of cases when trying to get a powerful dual sword build. So that's what we'll do to start with. The Master Swordsman set gives 3 great perks for dual swords, namely high skill key reduction, high close combat damage, and very importantly, massive Sign of the Cross skill damage. By the way, this video is going to be long, so sorry about that in advance, but because of that, I'm not going to go into skill trees in this video. Just know you want to unlock all of the passives, weapon passives, all of the key, defense and attack passives, and obviously what you need magic and ninjutsu wise to use all the shortcuts that we want to use. And you'll need the dual sword skills I'll be using here, namely Sign of the Cross, Water Sword and the Shrike. I won't be using Windstorm here as I don't really need to for what I want to show, but get that too, it's arguably the best dual sword skill of all of them. I'm also not going to go into core stats here either. My stats are already near max in every category, so obviously the damage numbers I'm doing will reflect that, but since I'm just showing you gear combinations here and some comparison damage numbers, well, I hope you'll get a pretty good idea of which builds do more damage than others without me turning this video into the next Lord of the Rings saga. Just know that a lot of the builds in this video are pretty much endgame builds that make use of heavy armor sets, so you will need a few points to allocate to make that work. For your swords, get your skill to 99 first, your heart 2 if you can, and then strength. But you'll need to have enough points to put into stamina to get your weight down, which depending on the armor combination could be anything from 48 to 99 points. So if you're still working up to getting that amount, make sure you go only with the amount of points you need in magic, dexterity and spirit to unlock the guardian spirit and skills that you're going to need to use, and no more until you have excess points to burn. But ultimately it comes down to having spare points for stamina and sometimes max points in both stamina and strength depending on the armor set. Mainly to keep your equipment weight below 70% and savour that sweet B agility rating. That's not true for all of these builds, but it is for some of the most powerful ones, as you'll soon see. Oh, and I'm not going to go into explaining how the shortcuts work or how I'm getting more close combat damage from prestige points or any of that stuff. Okay, now you know. Before I continue, I also want to give a big shout out to Reddit user Triune31. He did a ton of damage testing with various builds and kindly posted his results on Reddit a few days ago now, all of which helped the community understand damage in Nioh better than ever. I also give him credit for many of the dual sword builds I'm posting in this video, as ultimately I feel it's fair to say they came from his post. I've put a link to the Reddit post I'm talking about in the description below, and I highly recommend you go read it and show Triune31 some love. The last thing I want to mention before I show the build stuff is how damage works in Nioh. A lot of you guys have seen my close combat damage vids. In those, I always point out that those vids are about maxing close combat damage as a stat, and not about maxing damage. One of the reasons for that, which is pretty obvious, is that you can get more damage from other combinations, such as using Fanatics to get more critical damage, or Warrior of the West for proccing extra close combat damage on electrified enemies, and so on and that sort of thing. But another reason I go out of my way to point it out is due to the weirdness of testing damage in Nioh. Across a lot of builds I've tested, I've seen a lot of crazy numbers that, in a lot of cases, simply don't add up. I've even abandoned builds in the past, builds I haven't posted on my channel, because what I expected them to do based on the theory of combining their stats ended up being exactly what they didn't do, usually without a readily obvious explanation. Well, thanks to Triune31's post, as well as the tiring work of other Reddit users too, like SLJM8D, I don't know what that's meant to say, my leet speak converter breaks on that, but you know who you are, and thanks to you in part, we finally do have a bit of an explanation. It isn't fully exact yet, as how damage is calculated in Nioh is still a bit hazy, but what we do know is enough to help us make a new rule for better build decisions, and that rule is this. To get the most damage, make sure your builds have varying types and sources of damage. What does that mean? What it means is don't stack any one kind of damage as a stat if you want maximum damage. How will you know what is too much and what isn't? Good question. Fortunately, a couple of Reddit users have isolated close combat damage of 29% as being the breakpoint. That is, anything over that 29%, is where the diminishing returns seem to start. In practice, what that means is, if you have around 29% in close combat damage on your armor sets, you're better off with, say, familiarity damage bonus of A+ on your weapon, or skill damage instead of more close combat damage, etc. Okay, you get it. It's not that hard really, just vary up your damage sources, and if you cross the 29% threshold of any one particular source when you're stacking your type of damage, try to stack something else, try to mix it up. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, sometimes it's a fine line, but the point is to try to minimise potential diminishing returns on how much damage of a certain type that you stack by varying it up with other types of damage stats. So there, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Okay, now to the good stuff. Here's the base setup. First up, for nearly all of the best dual sword builds, you'll need a Yasukani Magatama. The Yasukani -1 set requirements perk, that allows you to combine less pieces of each set and get their bonus perks as if you had more pieces on. Basically equip one piece and get its 2-piece perk, equip 2 pieces and get its 3 pieces perk, and so on. That's what the Yasukani does for you. And you'll need it for these builds. Hopefully you'll have a Yasukani with extra yokai close combat damage too, and preferably with elemental damage that matches your element of choice. I like water for its damage buff, but I don't have a Yasukani with water damage. One has never dropped for me. But my other Magatami has both yokai close combat damage and water damage, so that's what I have there. So with accessories as simple as that, you can see the rest of the setup involves 5 core pieces. Futatsu dual swords, Warrior of the West bow, the Ravenwing rifle, and 2 Master Swordsman armor pieces. You can see them quite clearly there. Now those 5 pieces won't change. You can put them on and leave them in their slots no matter what combinations we use. Well, almost, but you'll see the anomaly builds later on. The Warrior of the West bow and the Ravenwing rifle, they give us a permanent 3.7% damage reduction from their armor set bonuses. Plus the Warrior of the West bow contributes to one of the builds we have that includes more Warrior of the West gear later on. So of those 5 pieces that you see there, the 3 that give us our damage perks are the Master Swordsman gear. That, and also we get extra damage from the agility damage bonus of A+ that is on the Warrior of the West bow. That's because agility damage bonus on your main ranged weapon does affect your overall damage. It's a better effect the lighter you are, but it still helps nonetheless. Familiarity damage that you see on the Ravenwing rifle, that does not affect your overall damage, just bear that in mind. The Futatsu dual swords are the first piece of the Master Swordsman set. The other 2 armor pieces combine to give us the main perks we want from it. Here is where you should bear in mind that a Master Swordsman armor is heavy armor. So, to keep your agility at a B rating, which means keeping your equipment weight under 70%, in addition to putting points into stamina like I already mentioned, you'll want to equip your heaviest armor in the armor slots that cost the least in equipment weight. Head and feet are the lightest 2 slots, so it stands to reason you should equip your 2 pieces there. However, some of the sets you'll combine with a Master Swordsman are actually even heavier, so it really is best to put those pieces in the lightest 2 slots instead of the Master Swordsman pieces. But the key aim here is to keep your weight 70% or less, and this can be achieved in most cases by simply leaving your Master Swordsman armor pieces in the head and leg slots, so that's what you're seeing here. So now we have a very easy system to understand. To get our other builds, that is to combine these builds, it becomes as simple as swapping in or out a secondary melee weapon, torso, arm and foot armor, and that's it, each and every time. Before we do some of that, I'll just touch on Guardian Spirits a little. With these builds you basically have 2 choices, Karajishi or Tengen. Tengen is the best, but with a caveat. To make it the best, you have to think about using it properly. You have to use Spirit Stones in advance to get Amrita to proc its perks, or you have to use Extraction Talismans to make it work at its fullest. Plus, to get attack perks, you have to constantly make sure when you're doing all that you are in a high stance. When doing the Shrike, for example, if you don't do all that, you have to remember to switch to high stance immediately after activating the Shrike from mid stance. Now see, all those things just do my head in. I prefer not to have to try to juggle so many things when I'm playing. If you don't mind doing all that, well, go Tengen. If you're like me, go Karajishi. In my tests, the difference between the upper end of the attack scale with the two is fairly negligible, but the amount of times I've lost attack because I forgot I was in mid-stance, or I forgot to pop an extraction talisman and so on is, well, too many times. Tengen also offers a great elemental buff of your choice though. I like water, Karajishi buffs lightning, so that kinda sucks. Tengen is better for buffing my element of choice there, which is also good as it can make it so you proc your water status faster than normal, I think. But even then, I still forget all the other stuff too much to make Tengen my favourite guardian spirit, even though if you play it right, I'll admit it is the best. So yes, Karajishi is my preferred pick primarily because of ease of use and consistency in attack gains from all skills and stances all the time. So that's why it's my preferred guardian spirit, and I'll be using it in this video from here on. Clan-wise, I've gone back to Honda. I've been told Clan Todo adds 2% extra attack for each heavy armor piece you have equipped. I tested Todo and found my damage was always lower with Todo than it was with Honda. I did only test with skills though, so perhaps Todo works with base damage, or, knowing Nioh, perhaps there was some other diminishing return thing going on that I was unable to isolate. Maybe in the future we'll isolate that and discover Todo is the best clan to be with. I don't know. All I know is Honda outdamaged Todo in my tests, so I'm sticking with it here. Now, the longer you're in a clan, the higher the perks it gives you, which those perks are shown in brackets next to the crest protection perks shown on this screen. I have 0 bonuses. Across all of my tests, I keep swapping in and out of clans, which has meant I never get these bonuses week to week, and that really sucks. So I'm going to stop doing that from now on and stay with Honda because I want those perks. Until someone can prove to me what's going on with Todo, that's what I'm doing. Okay, back to the build. So we have our 5 central core pieces sitting there. From here, it is simple as switching in pieces from other sets. So let's switch in, say, the Sonata set. Now, you can see Sonata doesn't have a melee weapon, so we can choose any weapon we want here. My personal preference whenever this slot is available is to go with the Atagi Sudamini Katana to get the Kingo set bonus of final blow damage. So that's what we'll do. Oh, and I've also reverted all the armor pieces to their original look. Hopefully that will help make it easier for you to maybe recognise what's what as we go on. Probably not, but I did it anyway. So yeah, now we have a dual sword Master Swordsman Sonata build. Because Sonata has final blow damage of 19%, on top of our 15% from Kingo's, we get a hefty boost to final blow damage with this build. We also get skill damage of 15.5% on top of our Master Swordsman 12.2% close combat damage. That's not a bad build and definitely quite powerful, I think. I unfortunately have skill damage on my weapon here. Now it would be better if it was close combat damage as Sonata has a skill damage perk, but I need the Futatsu weapon to get the Master Swordsman perk here, and screw re-rolling just for this test when we're talking about 6 or 7% above the 29% threshold previously mentioned. So there probably will be a slight diminishing return going on here, but it shouldn't be too bad. So let's just check it out in action anyway with that in mind. Okay, results aren't bad, but let's say we're not happy with that. Well, again, we go back to our core 5 pieces and swap in something else. This time let's take a look at a combo with the Warrior of the East set. Warrior of the East offers us a change to attack body perk of B when we get a 5-piece bonus. Since Warrior of the East does have a melee weapon we can swap in, we can get that perk. And bang, look at what happens to our attack. It's gone from 1941 to 2028. It could be higher too if I had more plus 36 in gloves or something, but I don't, so whatever. Either way, that's a great perk and our attack is probably as high as we're going to get it. Now, unlike Sonata, Warrior of the East is also a heavy set. but thanks to maxing out stamina and strength, we still come in under B agility at 69.7%. That's okay too, so let's go and check out how our 2028 level attack build fares. So as we can see, this build is really good and a lot more powerful than the Sonata build. Even if breaking the 29% threshold on our Sonata build wasn't optimal, it still wouldn't stack up to this. So the Warrior of the East build is the best so far, and not only in damage too. Our Sonata build gave us 261 toughness and 2259 defense, but our Warrior of the East build jacked that up to 367 toughness and 2319 defense. So it's a tank of a build that does also heaps of damage. Kill and not be killed, and we like that, so that's a good build. Okay, let's swap out Warrior of the East for another build. Let's see how it compares to the Warrior of the West set in the same situation. Remember, the swap is easy, just torso, hands and feet first. Warrior of the West also has a melee weapon, but we're going to leave it out because we won't be needing it to get the perks we want, thanks to the fact that we already have a set piece with that convenient Warrior of the West bow we already have on. Putting in the extra melee weapon would just rob us of getting a different perk from another set. Instead, I'll put the Kingo's Katana in the second melee slot to get us more damage reduction and more final blow damage. Now, the Warrior of the West set brings with it a close combat enemy electrified perk as its 5th set bonus, adding an extra 32.9% to our attack. With Karajishi as our spirit giving us lightning damage, and with that perk it makes sense to dump water as our element and switch to lightning. Well, you'd think so, right? So that's what we'll try. Unfortunately, I don't have a Magatama with lightning damage on it, that also has yokai close combat damage of 14.8% to match the one I have there now, so I'm going to leave my original Magatama there because I want to keep our raw damage perks the same for comparison purposes. Okay, we're all good to go. Let's see how this build fares. Note that I'm not going to try to proc lightning on enemies in advance, like you might if you really wanted to make the most of this build. The reason for that is casting extra lightning on Yoko bosses takes time and is mostly too slow to even get working for my liking, and doesn't work on all of them anyway. And on humans, well, it isn't really necessary at these damage levels to kill them any quicker than what I'll already be doing. So the real question is whether or not electrification procs on Yoko bosses from my weapon, and whether or not it is quick enough to make the extra perk worthwhile. So let's see. Okay, so our initial attacks are weaker with the Warrior of the West combo versus the Warrior of the East, and by a significant amount. And further, we kill nearly every Yoko boss so fast we couldn't really get the electrified perk to proc. In fact, we got it to proc on Hino Enma, but even after that, Warrior of the East set was doing 400 more damage per water sword swing because the electrified status ailment didn't seem to last. So yes, Warrior of the East still beats out Warrior of the West even with the electrified damage buff. And reverting to water instead of lightning damage won't tip the scales there either, because with the Warrior of the East we have the extra attack buff that the Warrior of the West set can't compete with, and it also fell a little short of the damage we were getting with the Sonata set too. So okay, it's back to water damage and time for a new set. Again, let's just swap out Warrior of the West pieces for the Kingo's armor set this time. We already had the Kingo's melee weapon on, so with that and the 3 armor pieces we can get the 5-piece damage bonus from Kingo's, which is damage from behind of 20%. And yes, that's a biggie. It's also a very different damage type that meets our need to vary our damage types up, so that's good too. Let's see how it fares. So in our initial sign of the cross attacks from the front, Warrior of the East set is still king. But surprisingly, Kingo's is second best, despite having less close combat damage than Warrior of the West and significantly less than the skill damage Sonata gives us. Kingo's is actually doing more damage from the front. It's the same whether it's yokai or humans too. In fact, Kingo's beats all other sets other than Warrior of the East, although it does beat Warrior of the East in final blow damage and damage from behind, at least in our tests so far. Right now, the Warrior of the East combo is best for non-situational damage, so that makes Kingo's the best for everything else. Okay, we still have more combos to play around with though before we decide what's best here and what's not. The next is to swap in pieces from, say, let's do the Armor of the Exceptional set. This set adds 12.2% extra close combat damage, but also another plus 10 attack and defense when using Karajishi, so if you're using Tengen at this point, I think it would be time to swap. The 5th perk of this set is Life, so that's a bit of a waste. We don't really need it. The set's already very tanky as it is. I think we'll leave on the Kingo's Katana though, to keep that sweet final blow damage and also ignore trying to get the Life perk. Remember earlier I said there are cases where you need to swap your heaviest pieces into the lightest slot? Well, that's the case here. The Armor of the Exceptional set is, well, it's exceptionally heavy. So look at our equipment weight. Even with 99 stamina and strength, it still brings us to 70.4%. To get that under 70% and get a B agility, we need to swap our head and chest around. Okay, that's done. Now we have 69.8% equipment weight and we're good to go to see how this fares. Well, the Armour of the Exceptional combo is surprisingly good. It's not as good as the Warrior of the East set though, but surprisingly, it is better than Kingo's from the front. So Kingo's just dropped from second best to third, at least in non-situational damage, and that's true against yokai or humans too. Now, you would think that since both the Armour of the Exceptional set and Kingo's set both have only 15% extra final blow damage, that they should be equal there. But we've just seen that's not the case. The Kingo's combo gets significantly more final blow damage, and this would appear to be because the damage from behind perk seems to apply on downed opponents, regardless of whether you're standing in front of their head or feet. So Kingo's will always win in final blow damage, it would seem. Still, this test is very surprising because the Armour of the Exceptional set isn't meant to be this good. But it seems it is, which is another reason why we've learned we can't always rely on the numbers shown in stats to determine what is and what is not a good build. There is some kind of hidden damage for your heavy armor set that you can't see but is definitely applying, and it's something that becomes evident when we apply another armor set, which is Tatanashi, another heavy armor set, later on. So out of interest, notice that the final perk on the Armour of the Exceptional set is skill damage of 17.4%. Actually, it's 21.4% when equipped, which is higher than Kingo's damage from behind perk. So what would that mean if we were to wear only the Armour of the Exceptional and no combo sets at all? The first problem we have is if we just swap all the armour pieces out, it pushes us over the 70% equipment weight mark. To get around this, we need to dump one piece. I'll dump the head armour and replace it with something lighter. You could put an elemental damage buffing headpiece here, like News Mask for example, but I'm going to put the Sonata head helm piece here so that we can get more final blow damage. I'm doing that because without the set head piece, we lose the skill damage perk we want, and to get it back, we need to swap a weapon slot out for the actual Armour of the Exceptional's set weapon. That means we lose the final blow damage we just had in the weapon slot, so having the Sonata helm compensates for that by giving some of it back to us. Okay, let's see how this all works. Okay, first up, we saw that the final blow damage was less than Kingo's, as expected. You can't compete with 15% final blow damage stacking with 20% from behind. Kingo's is always going to rule there. But what we also saw was that overall damage was higher than with the Master Swordsman combo set, whether from the front or from behind. So what this means is, Kingo's now drops from 3rd best to 4th best in non-situational positions. It still rules in final blow damage though, and in damage from behind, which is strange since stat-wise it probably shouldn't. It should only be doing 8.5% close combat damage plus 20% damage from behind, which when you total that up is 28.5% compared to the Armour of Exceptional's 12.2% plus 21.4%. Now, it is possible there is a case of diminishing returns here, since I have skill damage on my weapon that, when combined with everything else, has pushed skill damage to over 50.1% in this build. So if that's the case, let's test it. Let's see if Armour of the Exceptional ends up doing even more damage when using a close combat damage weapon instead of a skill damage weapon. So on goes my famed Shishio sword. Alright, let's go and test this.
世の剣主に受けうるか。この感覚久方ぶりよ。よく立ち筋。宝蔵院が槍術の妙、その目で刻め。おう、やるの。
And the answer is an unequivocal yes, proving that diminishing returns apply as much to skill damage as they do to close combat damage, and really answering the question that it will still apply regardless of whether or not the damage is stacked from one source, like your armor, or many. Which, of course, changes everything, because now we know we have to consider the different types of damage we're getting from every single source that we get it. This is why there's so much debate around what causes what in Nioh, because it is very easy to forget that, say, you're getting skill damage buffed from one area, and that could be conflicting with skill damage you are getting buffed from another, or you're getting close combat attack buff in one area that is causing diminishing returns for you because you're also getting it from another. I don't want this video to get any more complicated than it already is, so let's just leave it there and stick with our simple rule, namely that you want your damage sources to be as varied as you can reasonably get them. So back to what we just saw. We now know that when paired with a close combat damage weapon, the armor of the exceptional set offers one of the highest damaging builds you can get. In fact, we've seen it will outdo even itself when mixed with the Master Swordsman set, the staple of most dual sword builds. It also beats Kingo's from non-situational positions, but still not from behind or with final blow damage. But it is definitely doing more damage than our top dog, the Warrior of the East Master Swordsman combo. So it's now the top dog. That also makes the armor of the exceptional with close combat damage on a weapon build the king of non-situational dual sword damage. So now the choice becomes one between that and the Kingo's Master Swordsman combo with skill damage on your weapon. Or is it? There's one more build to test, and it's one of the builds Trine31 tested and pointed out to be the best for non-situational damage. The question is it better than our armor of the exceptional build? Well, let's see. The build we're talking about is this one. It's a Master Swordsman build again, but this time with 3 Warrior of the West pieces and 2 Tatanashi pieces. You know the drill with the Warrior of the West perks, so I won't go over those again, except to say in this case we're not unlocking the Electrified perk this time. Tatanashi is used to get its equipment weight damage bonus at A perk. This is about 15.5% all up, but really it's less than that because it seems to conflict with something else, which is that inherent weight bonus perk I was talking about before. And it seems that with that conflict it really only ends up adding about 5% extra damage when you have more than 30.1 weight. So with this build being 35 at weight, so yeah, the gain from Tatanashi isn't much, but it is enough to make a difference, and more to the point, it's a different type of damage source, so it doesn't have any other diminishing returns that we're aware of. So let's see how this build fares in the same scenario as all the others. Okay, so there it is. The Tatanashi Warrior of the West Master Swordsman build is weaker than the armor of the exceptional build with close combat damage on your weapon, both against humans and against yokai. However, the armor of the exceptional build is significantly weaker than the Tatanashi build when using Sign of the Cross, as the extra 30% Sign of the Cross damage you get from the Master Swordsman set has been removed from the armor of the exceptional build. And still, even now, the Kingo's build wins the final blow damage and damage from behind race. So which is the best out of all of these builds? Well, the answer is it's relative. Armour of the Exceptional is the best build for raw, non-situational damage, especially if you're not a big user of Sign of the Cross. The Warrior of the East Master Swordsman is arguably better than the Armour of the Exceptional build, but only if you do use Sign of the Cross a lot. The Tadanashi Warrior of the West Master Swordsman combo sits behind the Warrior of the East combo, so it's not the best build, but it's still very good. But I would argue the Kingo's Master Swordsman build is generally the best. With that build, you won't have as high non-situational damage as the Tadanashi, Warrior of the East, or Armour of the Exceptional builds, but you aren't far behind, and you do have significantly higher final blow damage and damage from behind. Everyone makes use of final blow damage, so that one's a no-brainer. So the only question is whether or not you use damage from behind that much, and I'm going to say you do, even if you don't think you do. Hitting enemies from behind happens a lot, even if you aren't trying, just by nature of the way you evade blows in Nioh. You'd be surprised how much you'll proc the extra damage from behind in normal gameplay. Plus, with Kingo's you don't have to give up Sign of the Cross, so while your non-situational damage is slightly less than the 2 other powerhouse builds, or 3 other powerhouse builds as it were, it's not that much less in comparison to what you also gain. I honestly barely notice a difference in time to kill between all of these four top builds, and ultimately that's what matters. Plus, and this is a big plus, the Kingo's combination does not break the diminishing returns problem from stacking perks. If you have skill damage on your weapon, you are sweet for your overall damage output. Oh, and not only that, it's the lightest of all the builds by far. That means it's not the tankiest, but hey, choosing the best build is all a balancing act of gaining this while losing that. I said it before and I'll say it again, I think the Kingo's combination is the best overall, but what is actually the best is the best build for you that suits your playstyle. There is no actual best when you really think about it that way. So there you have it, peoples, a not so quick look at the most powerful dual sword builds in the game. I doubt you found this more interesting than I found it exhausting, but I hope you did. Don't crucify me for not writing the damage numbers from all these tests on the screen. This was already a shit ton of time and effort as it was. If you really want to check those numbers, just pause the video when you need to, and you'll confirm everything that I've just said, because that's what I did. And with that, bye for now, people.